Almost 1 month into the illegal war that war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu and his American poodle Donald Trump imposed on Iran, the Islamic Republic has completely disturbed the mental balance of its adversaries. First, we saw the complete mental derangement of Trump. I made a video on this, you can watch it here. And now, other members of the Trump administrations like Secretary of Treasury Marco Rubio and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. The more you watch them talk, the more you get convinced about the Iranians' ability to drive these Western racist clowns absolutely nuts. For example, Marco Rubio today contradicted his boss publicly, saying that the US was engaged in diplomatic talks with the old Iranian regime. Leavitt publicly accepted the criminality of the Trump administration's actions on live TV when she said that members of the Iranian government, including the supreme leader, were assassinated because they had lied to her boss. This would be the broad focus of my video tonight. Also in my video, Iran trolls Trump by taking a group of Western journalists right inside the Strait of Hormuz. So please stay tuned. Up until now, Trump told us that the regime change was his primary objective behind launching the illegal war on Iran. He repeatedly said that since many old leaders had been assassinated, this had marked the regime change, adding that the new regime had approached him with the offer of peace talks. This is what he said earlier today.
But we've had regime change, if you look already, because the one regime was decimated, destroyed, they're all dead. The next regime is mostly dead. And the third regime, we're dealing with different people than anybody's dealt with before. It's a whole different group of people.
But only 11 minutes later, Trump's Secretary of Treasury, Marco Rubio, told Al Jazeera that his government was speaking to the old regime.
At the end of the day, we have to see if these people end up being the ones in charge, seeing if they're the ones that have the power to deliver. We're going to test it. We are hopeful that that's the case. There are clearly people there talking to us in ways that previous people in charge in Iran have not spoken to us in the past. Some of the things they're willing to do, some of the things they're saying they're willing to do. Obviously, they have to go do it. We're going to test that proposition very strongly because we always prefer to settle things through negotiation and diplomacy. But we also have to be prepared for the fact that that effort might fail, that we are dealing with a 47-year-old regime that still has a lot of people involved in it.
That we are dealing with a 47-year-old regime.
And if you think this was the peak of the Trump administration's clown show at an international forum, then wait. As the day came to an end, Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, went a step further by accepting her boss's criminality before the whole world. She said that the Americans and Israeli terrorists had assassinated members of the Iranian government because they had lied to Trump, implying that this was a new punishment method under the new US administration, that anybody who lies should be assassinated.
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place and the ongoing negotiations. Of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes. When the president says more reasonable, again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the president, which is why many of the previous leaders were killed.
Now you can imagine how this entire US administration is behaving like headless chickens. So when I told you that Trump was lying by claiming to hold talks with the Iranians, I wasn't wrong. This is Trump's desperate attempt to A, hide his military's failure against Iran, and B, to calm the sentiments as far as the prices of crude oil in international market is concerned. Unfortunately, the more these clowns open their mouth, the more they are exposing themselves. This also further raises the stature of the Iranian military, which is already earning global plaudits for giving grief to two of the most powerful militaries in the world. Listen to Alan Duncan, a former British foreign minister in the Conservative government, on Sky News.
To start with, I just was interested to hear your view broadly on the state of the oil markets at the moment, because it feels like they're at the mercy of Donald Trump's tweets to an extent.
To some extent. I mean, firstly, this is the inevitable consequence of what is an utterly unnecessary conflict. And also, it may be just only the beginning. It is absolutely inevitable that you'll see a dramatic increase in oil prices, which of course then affects fertilizers and everything else as well, if you close the Strait of Hormuz. But if Donald Trump puts ground troops, for instance, on Kharg Island, which is the main export terminal for Iran, not only is that an escalation and it's going to be catastrophic, but the Iranians will do two things. First, they'll just cut off that supply of oil, which adds to the problem, and they will chuck missiles to more, I think, vulnerable targets in the Gulf. And they will invoke the Houthis more in Yemen. And if you then close the Bab al-Mandeb, which is the Red Sea pinch point, you absolutely, dramatically increase the pain that all of us are suffering. You've got rationing in Bangladesh, you've got rationing in Sri Lanka, rationing in the Philippines, you've got massive food problems growing in, or brewing in India. This is a catastrophe of, I would argue, primarily the Israelis making.
And in terms of, actually getting things through the Strait, what are our options? Do you think it has to be a military option?
Well, the idea that you can actually land troops on Iran and somehow open up a waterway is utterly illogical. No, there is not a military option, because what's different from the Iraq War is that the threats are asymmetric. You can have little skiff boats, which mini little motor torpedo boats with a little gun at the front or something, or low-level drones, which are very threatening to shipping. The ships then become uninsurable. Therefore, the oil will not flow. So the idea that you can somehow stop these risks militarily is, I think, pretty fanciful. Perhaps with an enormous navy and a massive deployment of weaponry may be, but I don't see that. So I think this is only going to get worse unless the conflict stops.
Across the Atlantic, in the US, even experts are calling out Trump's fake bravado. This is former CIA operative Sam Faddis on the Steve Bannon show.
What's your assessment of this enemy, sir?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me say this as a caveat up front. Nothing I'm saying should be taken as we can't win, or we have to run away, or we've been defeated. All I'm really saying is you're not going to win by underestimating your opponent and just continuing to do something in a certain way that hasn't worked so far. These guys are very tough. They're very committed. You have this whole, they are all 12ers, which means they believe we are headed for the apocalypse, which is their duty to bring on. And on the other side, they're guaranteed to win. That ought to give you pause, that they want to reap the whirlwind and believe they will win on the other side. And they are not disorganized. They are very organized, very methodical. They think many moves ahead. These are the guys that literally invented chess. So doesn't mean you can't beat them. Just means you better stop underestimating them. They are not attempting to confront the U.S. military. They are holding a knife to the world economy.
The Persians are the ancient enemy, have been the ancient enemy of the West, right?
Yes.
It was Rome's, even more than the Germanic tribes, right, who eventually overran Rome. And one of the reasons they overran them, the Roman Empire got bled out fighting the Persians. The Persians against the Greeks, the Persians against the Romans. They are tough hombres. And guess what? They didn't fight Athens and they didn't fight Rome because they were more Jeffersonian Democrats. They were not. And I don't think they've changed a lot. And you've layered on top of a quite dangerous apocalyptic death cult. You combine the death cult with just the Persian tenacity, etc. It's not to say we can't beat them. You can beat them. But you got to understand, if you're going to beat them, you got to beat them, right? Or come up with some way to hammer them enough to get them to the negotiating table. And we also know, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, these are guys that as we've known for the negotiations we try to have on all the Obama and President Trump, all these other stuff, they're not guys that come in and shake your. You don't get to a deal with them in the first meeting. They don't shake your hand. They're amazing. They're bureaucratic. Because of millennia, they've been bureaucratic. They have a whole way that they roll. The negotiations just go on and drag on and on, just naturally in any business deal, much less something where they're negotiating their survival or potential survival of their country, sir.
Yeah, and like in any time you're negotiating with somebody in this kind of hardcore environment, it's all about leverage. Okay, right now, how are they looking at this? There's a clock ticking on the world economy in regard to what is already happening in the Straits of Hormuz.
Even Iranians living in the West are now beginning to see the real nefarious motive of Trump.
Looking at what Donald Trump has said this morning or this afternoon now, very confident of regime change in Iran, that the Americans have been very reasonable. As an Iranian over here, how do you feel about that? Have they been reasonable?
2 points, Jane, since Donald Trump spoke on Air Force One last night, and of course, this recent tweet. And that is, and we are more and more seeing the light of day, and that is perhaps this war has always been about Iran's oil. That's what he said last night. We want Iran's oil, and now we're dealing with a new, more reasonable regime. The regime we know is now held by the IRGC, the most emboldened and hardline factions. So if you ask Iranian people in Iran, they'll tell you that things are even worse because we're dealing with a younger, more rabid and more emboldened version of the regime we had. And I think that's the reality. And if Donald Trump continues to say this, that we're dealing with a new regime, quite frankly, some may say he's insulting the U.S. intelligence because we're not dealing with a new regime. And when it comes to oil, some Iranians would say is history repeating itself. Iran's oil has long been controlled in earlier days by Russia and then the Brits. And in 1953, we both know that the United States and the British orchestrated that famous coup that overthrew Mossadegh, who wanted to nationalize Iran's oil. He was the first democratically elected prime minister. And then after that, since 1979, Iran's oil, in more ways than one, became the greatest asset for the Chinese. And the Chinese are the ones who have kept the IRGC from going bankrupt. So here we are, Donald Trump, presumably after Iran's oil. How he's going to get that, we have to wait and see.
It's safe to say that Iranians are not talking to Trump because there isn't anything common between their respective demands. Iran isn't going to give up their right to pursue the peaceful nuclear program. If they didn't agree to this demand before they were attacked, what makes Trump and Rubio think that the Islamic Republic would do now after the Americans and Israeli terrorists killed their supreme leader, hundreds of other schoolgirls in Minab and bombed key civilian infrastructures such as hospitals, schools, power plants, oil refineries and oil depot, among others? And I do not see that Trump is mentally prepared yet to pay reparations to Iran, accept the Iranian ownership of the Strait of Hormuz and end its military bases from the region, since these are some of the core demands put forward by Iran. Pakistan can try as much as it wants, but the fact remains that it has no power to act as a guarantor. Trump will most likely have to go down the route of either ending the war, even if it means public humiliation, or engaging his military for a land invasion. If he chooses the latter, he would experience firsthand what Iranians are capable of. I think someone should share this warning by Iran's first vice president, Reza Arif, who wrote this, and I quote, "Trump can only decide about sending troops to Kharg." He's talking about Kharg Island. But when it comes to bringing them back, the decision is no longer his, because no one returns home from hell. End quote. I will leave you with 2 videos that just show the disgust against the US and Israel in the region, and also Iran's determination to keep trolling Trump. In the first video, children in Iraq are donating money by wrapping their currency notes around a replica of an Iranian missile to express their solidarity with the Islamic Republic in this war. In the second video, a group of Western journalists can be seen enjoying a guided tour of the Strait of Hormuz by the Iranian government. This was the Iranian way of telling its enemies that it enjoys the complete dominance over this crucial waterway.
Days into the US-Israeli war in Iran, now we are in the Strait of Hormuz in southern Iran.
For decades, the Islamic Republic guaranteed the security of this strait, and countless vessels carrying oil, gas, other cargo passed here on a daily basis for the benefit of really the entire global economy. But all of that was disrupted by the American and Israeli aggressors.
The strait is not closed, it has a new regulatory regime, and even the shipping finance, shipping insurance companies have accepted this regulation.
It is Israel's fault now that the Strait of Hormuz is closed to ships that are unfriendly to Iran. And Iran is not just defending itself, not just defending the region, but it is potentially upending an economic world order that has served Western powers, which have served Israel.
That's it for me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.